Right now. Hello and welcome to week 2 of Movement Building from Home. I'm Chad, one of your hosts from Mozilla, joined today by on each week of this series by Abby, and we're convening these calls in response to the COVID-19 crisis. We want to bring people together for peer-to-peer learning about sustaining our activism and movement building work in these difficult and uncertain times. This call is going to focus on practicing online community care. Back in week 1, we talked about running online meetings. And in the next 2 weeks, we'll talk about personal ecology or self-care, as well as practicing online community management. Quick reminder that these notes are your notes. So as we go along today, please jump in, take notes about things that are powerful for you, +1 ideas and suggestions that you might like to support. Go ahead and maybe ask some questions if you'd like someone to unpack something or clarify a term, but please do engage as fully as you'd like in the notes. They are meant to be there for you. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Abby for a quick reminder of our community participation guidelines.
Thanks, Chad. Yeah, so just as a reminder, please be respectful, honest, inclusive, accommodating, appreciative, and open to learning from everyone else. I do not attack, demean, disrupt, harass, or threaten others, or encourage such behavior. So I'm highlighting the link to our full community participation guidelines there. If anything happens, please do reach out to either Chad or myself. Our emails are linked in the doc. That's probably the safest way to reach us. And I do want to say thank you all for really exemplifying this, especially the last week, being inclusive and listening and sharing fully. So huge thanks for following that. Back to Chad.
Absolutely. And today, these are our goals for the call. We, of course, want to check in with each other again and with our communities and hold space to listen to each other to see how things are going. We want to share practical and effective ways to show care in online communities. And we want to have discussions that help us consider and practice care as a dimension of accessibility and equity and inclusion, or justice and welcomeness in the communities of which we are part and those that we serve. To get us started there with your own reflections, Abby's going to lead us in an exercise regarding your own community experience.
Awesome, thanks, Chad. So we're back to silent documenting, one of my favorite things. So in here, before we do that, there are a couple definitions on what we mean by community care. I'm going to highlight the second one from Heather Dockeray, where community care is basically any care provided by a single individual to benefit other people in their lives. This can take the form of protests, for which community care is best known, but also simple interpersonal acts of compassion. So keeping that in mind, we're now talking about how to do this in an online setting. So how are you showing care to your community online? What has worked well is the first prompt. And then the second one is, what challenges have you faced caring for your community during this time? So we'll give you a couple minutes, probably 5 minutes, to go through and do some silent documenting. If you'd rather verbalize verbalize, feel free to just speak out loud and one of us will take notes. We'll go on for another minute. If you haven't had a chance yet, do skim these and plus one things that really resonate with you. And make sure you write down a couple of the challenges you faced. I think that'll help us frame our discussion going forward. All right. Let you wrap up your sentences. I'll also say, I think I'm realizing that this is the regular time of the week where my husband plays online games with his work team. So if you hear some yelling, that is what's happening. I tried to text him to let him know that I'm busy. But we'll see if you hear a scream. Everything's fine. He's just losing at a game. Don't worry. Last week they were playing code names. This week, based on what he's saying, I feel like it's a different game, so I'm not sure. Cool. So before I start summarizing what's written there, does anyone want to verbalize what they've written? Agreed, Codenames is a fun game. There's a nice website you can use to play it online with people. So I'll go through, see the ones that have a lot of plus ones. Starting the call by asking how people are doing. Yes, that's nice. And it isn't just business as usual right now. So making sure you give space for people to express what's going on. We try to do that with this call with the opening question. It's one of the options. Working on our own community participation guidelines and developing our reporting process that will support reporters. Yes. I don't know if Chad, you want to say a little bit about this, but it is important to have like that reporting process established.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only does that help people kind of have a concrete next step, like something that they can do when they're in that moment of maybe not knowing exactly what to do in response to something that inflicted some harm on them or another person in their community, but that kind of establishment of structure, I think, goes a long way over time to showing how serious you are as a community about showing care for each other. We'll talk a little bit about that today. It kind of creates an institutional memory of procedures and how these things are done. There are people that become then accountable for maintaining that process and really making sure it's working well. It's strong and advisable for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. Yeah, and I think just generally, oftentimes adding more structure will help alleviate some of the stress in your community and show that kind of care. So it's nice to see those kinds of things going on. Doing less and providing a breather to our community instead of piling on. Yes, you got a ton of plus ones for that one. I don't know if whoever wrote that wants to verbalize a bit. Erin?
Yeah, we've just been trying to give a little bit of extra space, and even on our team, we have people with small kids and that are trying to do two full-time jobs plus deal with two kids, and it's just been, I think, an opportunity for us to just kind of take a deep breath and understand that we're just not going to get the same amount of stuff done and not try. And actually on one of our leadership calls, somebody else brought that up, that there was a nice article. I'll try to find it while we're chatting, but just about, I think there's been a push towards more productivity in some spaces, and we've been trying to not add additional pressure that way. And I've seen other communities, I think the Wikimedia Foundation seemed like they had similar strategies for their community that was really nice to see in a bigger way. And then also I think it was our open side that actually was the one that was like, we're going to stop asking people to do code reviews for a little while. And I think that was just a really forward looking way to go. I'm curious if others have also done less or been okay with less.
Yeah, that's great, Erin. And maybe Cornelius can speak about Wikimedia.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Wikimedia Foundation. I'm working for the German affiliate, but we have a similar scheme that basically the workload was just how do you say that? Was less like the workload at the moment is by 50%, while we can still get 100% payment for the work. So it's like that was something that the Wikimedia Foundation has done, and generally they're trying to reach out and support. Period. There's nothing much more to tell, I would say. So.
Yeah, thanks. And I know the Journal of Open Source Software paused any submissions, that's what it's called, for a couple months. So it's nice to see that. And yeah, please link that article you mentioned. In the comments from West Slope Library, we have, I tell my team that their productivity doesn't need to be the same because part of their work is learning how to work differently. Yeah, there's a lot to learn nowadays. So I'm glad you're all acknowledging that. Another couple patterns I'm seeing here. I'm initiating calls with people who've gone quiet, silent, chatting with them for no other purpose than to see how they're going. Yeah, I think that's great. And I know some of my more extroverted friends and colleagues are having a really hard time, especially if they're isolated by themselves and not even with family. So it's nice to reach out. Yeah, Grant's talking about forwarding concerns to the people with the power to affect change. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and power sharing is a big thing right now. And then Cornelia's got a bunch of +1s within my office. I'm the one who cares a lot about others and listens to them. We are an office that is basically entirely based in Berlin, so social calls among colleagues weren't a thing before. I'm trying to replicate this by dropping a lot of coffee calls in the calendar for simple chats without agendas. This has helped to shorten the distance. Yeah, and I know our team that Chad and I are both on has this Friday social call that's opt-in. You don't have to go, but it is nice to join and just, I think Chad will be talking about this more later. I forgot it's in your thing. But as a distributed team, it's good.
Everybody's thing that's here. It's great.
Cool. Yeah, and then on the challenges side, Zoom fatigue, even for social calls. It does feel like I'm living my life on Zoom now, between the social calls and then maybe a dance class and then all my work calls. It's I'm just on Zoom all day long. How long can this go on for? So I think that's why it's really important for social things to be opt-in, just acknowledging that people are a bit overwhelmed, can be a bit overwhelmed. I was surprised to see GoTo bombing. It's all the platforms are struggling with this right now.
It was so awful. And I had heard other groups have, had these issues with Zoom, and I had sort of thought, well, that was a Zoom thing and not a GoTo thing. And so we were just completely shocked yesterday when it happened to us. So we're looking for processes to keep things as open as possible. So again, if anybody has any sort of guidance, I really liked, Abby, how you guys were doing this. It seemed like there was some automation in the process, but anyway, I'm curious on that front.
Yeah, we can link a post that some of our colleagues put on how to prevent Zoom bombing. It's just changing a lot of your settings. We have this waiting room now. You may have noticed it before you came in, and there's more moderation now than they had before, which has helped. But yeah, we can link that in the doc for sure.
Yeah, I'll go grab that. Thanks,
Chad. Cornelius, I'm a person who shows affection by hugging. I'm missing this a lot. Trying to replace that by listening more. Yeah, I've definitely heard that a lot this week. And I was on a call this morning that was described as a virtual hug, which it's oh, that's very nice. I feel some of that hug, maybe not the full hug, but it was something. And then, yeah, we should probably move on to the next part. But yeah, virtual onboarding for new members definitely struggle, especially if you're not used to working online. I just noticed the time. I'm going to pass it off to Chad. Sorry, I cut 5 minutes of your time.
No, I like it. It's extra challenging. I'm trying to get a little bit shorter and tighter with this section every day this week as well. Started off 3 minutes over, got down to 1 minute over, went back to 2 minutes over. So here we go together. A couple of quick notes. We're only calling this section "How to Practice Community Care Online" because we're all here together. We'll all have ideas to share through this discussion, through the breakout rooms, through our shared insights. You know, we're not the experts, the authorities, but together we can all discuss together. Sorry for the redundancy. We can all discuss together how to practice community care online. And of course, the other piece here is that community care has a long, long history, and that history is also often stewarded and really moved ahead by women of color and others. It's certainly not my history to share, and there's a lifetime of practice and research you could do here. We want to share our approach. We want to hear from you about your approaches. We want to share things that are kind of on our feeds and going across our screens right now. And so that's the intent here. And we hope that you'll join us in really making these notes about care come to life. So when we think about practicing community care online, we start with some key principles. And the first is really belonging. How do we help people feel like they are welcomed, included, definitely a part of the community? There are many ways you can do this, from multiple contribution pathways to different kinds of onboarding practices, to just, having these things like maybe there's the opt-in social hour for newcomers, or some special attention to newcomers that make sure that they know you're paying attention, you've seen that they've arrived, and you want to continue moving forward with them. When we think about how to do this in blog posts and announcements and call for proposals, we have a phrase we use called Mimi, sometimes hashtag Mimi, just make it more inviting. So that's always a question that you can ask and that we can ask. How do we make it more inviting? We think about providing enough structure so there is clear purpose. Many of our workplaces, our projects, our communities, part of what brings people together is an idea of shared mission. And we want to have enough structure to keep that mission very clear, and to keep kind of like our top level tasks, what it is we're doing to try to achieve this mission clear as well, or maybe the outcomes that we want on the way to achieving this mission. We want all of those things to be clear, even if there are different ways to get to those milestones. Of course, with the structure, we want flexibility, especially now, so that we can pause, we can care for each other. We have opportunities to ask, does this work? Things like feedback here, or check-ins during our meetings at work right now. Taking the time to really kind of check with people in an ongoing, almost iterative design process for our workflows. We think this is working. How do we know it's working? Because we'll stop, we'll ask, and we'll give everyone the permission to change things so that it works better for other people. And we think about safety and privacy and other things that are related to that. So whether we're thinking about platforms, or we're thinking about data collection, or we're thinking about kind of like timings or where we announce things, we want to do things so that we are showing an awareness of our audience's needs for safety, especially privacy, from things like surveillance or Zoom bombing, things like that. We also think about rituals. So we think about the power of doing these repeated things that demonstrate care, that are consistent, that are foundational, that people can kind of rely on and rely on one another through. So our community participation guidelines are one form. We always share that at the beginning of a call, even in this abbreviated form. We try to always make sure people know to whom they can report, or if they're not comfortable reporting to us, we'll very often make a point to suggest reporting to somebody else in Mozilla. Or in other programs, we've had community co-facilitators, or maybe you want to report to them rather than to us, things like that. But by having those guidelines and going over them, you can kind of, over time, right, consistently show people you have their back, and that this is a community that cares about coming together in positive and generative ways and doesn't stand for any kind of harm or ill intent. We have our check-in rituals at the top of this call, an opportunity to kind of take the temperature. How are people doing? Are there things that we should address, or some care we can show before we get on to the quote unquote work? And these check-ins can happen with increasing frequency now. They can happen across different channels, but approaching them systemically, making sure they're a part of the culture, prevents us from forgetting about them or taking shortcuts to the work at any time, but especially during difficult times like this. At the end of this call, but in other calls, sometimes at the beginning, we also have gratitude and recognition rituals. I think it's really super important to give people a chance to lift up others. Not only does that provide some recognition for whoever is getting the thanks, but it can feel very good. It can feel very kind of like giving and generous to the person who's offering the thanks. So we always want to give people an opportunity just to express some gratitude for the things that are inspiring or helping them the most right now. It's often a great catalyst as well for letting people know about different work that's going on, different folks they could talk to, different needs they could have met by working with different people, starting new collaborations, things like that. We think now is also a great time to think about new norms. Are there ways that your team can agree to work in more flexibility or have more checks for what people need? This is a good time to do that. We think about, and many people have mentioned this already, prioritization. Can we all get together and kind of discuss what it is that is most important to continue and sustain right now online, and to do that? What is the one thing we must do? And can we give up doing everything, at least for a little bit? And it doesn't mean you'll never do, everything that was done before again. But what it means is you can kind of create some space for the other things that are needed now by really thinking through what the priorities are. And if there are things that can be let go of or kind of reinvented right now, to funnel towards the one big thing that is most important for all of you to continue together in this mission-driven community. We also think about norms around personal ecology and self-care, making sure, and we'll talk about this more in depth next week, making sure you are taking care of yourself and sustaining yourself so you can sustain your activism and your movement. But in modeling that, you also want to create norms where you're encouraging, the community members around you also to attend to personal ecology and self-care. And personal ecology and self-care can be very much wrapped up in intersections of privilege, right? Not everyone has the opportunity to do this at any moment, let alone in a moment as difficult and with the pressures and anxieties that we have right now. But if this is something you feel that you can hold for yourself, this is the time to ask, how do I hold that for others? How do I champion these opportunities? How do I provide some training on these opportunities? How do I push back against people that say we don't have time for this right now? How do I gently remind people who are caring so much for others to care for themselves? This is a good time to develop some shared norms around personal ecology and do that gentle accountability where we remind each other to take care of ourselves as well as the community. We think about mutual support and resourcing and resource sharing on these calls. A lot of the conversations we're having around them can be examples of this. But as we go along, listening, asking, assessing needs, that's a great first step, kind of like a design process for making sure people are getting what they need right now from your community. Along with that, assessing needs around privacy and security. You may find that you want to have a couple different channels, a couple different platforms, a couple different meetings with different settings for folks who can participate in one way, but perhaps don't feel comfortable participating in another. This is an important time to communicate your asks, but also what you're offering your community members very clearly to really make your value exchanges as transparent as possible. And what this does, right, this will allow people to make informed choices about what they give their time and attention to right now as they're, going through that generous act of spending so much of themselves during this difficult moment. You want them to really have a clear understanding of what they're offering and what they're going to get back so that they don't experience burnout as quickly, so that they experience something kind of like just and equitable in the ways they interact with your community and your community members. So good time to get very clear about what you're asking and what you're offering so people can make informed choices. Same thing with the risks involved with different platforms and ways that you might be protecting community members' online identity. Talked a lot about how we did this with Zoom last week. We mentioned a little bit of it again today. Happy to talk about it further at some point. We also want to be transparent about the risks and the steps you're taking to mitigate them. You may not be able to eliminate every risk, but you should be able to kind of reduce the harm, the potential for harm in any platform or channel that you use, to acknowledge that possibility, to talk about what you're doing, and to make sure that's clear to community members as well, so they know what the choices that they're making when they join you online. And this is a good time, right, to revisit your allocation and coordination of available resources, to think about what's needed where, to think about, where folks can kind of say, yeah, I was using a ton of this resource before, or I really needed this before, but now that my work is fixed here, I have more time, or I can give up this time, or I can give up these resources, and think about where they should go. And that can be part of your ongoing listening and kind of design process to assess and respond to new needs in your community. We think about how we disagree as a way of showing care as well. This is a moment where, fear-driven responses, anxiety-driven responses can come to the forefront. People can be frustrated, bored, anxious. This is a difficult time for everyone. So paying some attention to how you approach conflict and conflict resolution is important, probably more important than any one particular set of activities. Thinking about that, talking about it together, kind of rehearsing what might happen when there's a problem. One thing we talk about is deconstructive criticism. This is when two people in a kind of a debate, or maybe a third party, notice that the discussion is no longer about ideas, but it's becoming personal in an escalating way. People might be withdrawing, people might be getting defensive, and deconstructive criticism, I need to go dig out my source for this. It's not the literary theory, but instead it's a way of pressing pause. Whoever notices that this is happening, just, I wonder if we might stop for a moment, because I notice we're really far apart. And I'd love to understand why. So could this person explain how they got to where they're thinking? And then you invite the other person to explain just their own experience, how they got to where they're thinking. And then the focus of the conversation doesn't become, picking one side or another, but what did we hear in both of those thought processes that would let us move forward together from here? It's a good time to allow increased response time to asks, to new information, for processing, right? To overcome spontaneous kind of fear-driven defensiveness. This is not the moment to ask people for, hot takes, or you want to make sure something is not urgent. Don't treat it urgently. If it is urgent, have structures and ways to kind of present that in ways that don't trigger defensive reactions. And one way to do that is just to share key information and to gather people's responses ahead of conversations, and make the conversations about, well, we all had a chance to look at this new information, and here are some patterns I saw. What am I missing? What are other people seeing here? And, make it an invitation to continue a discussion about something people have seen before, so they don't feel put on the spot. We encourage you to think about care in your listening posts, right? So all the channels where you're kind of like monitoring what's going on in your community, do careful, caring moderation there, moderate for equity in those spaces, do those things, continue those things you're already doing, but try to assess needs. So it might be you need some new channels. Maybe a whole lot of everything is getting lumped into one channel right now, and some people need, discussion of COVID-19 resources separate from a channel about the original mission, about the original work, about professional development, things like that. You want to try to have some content sensitivity, really, and to think about providing people access in transparent ways to the different conversations that might be happening, but not to put all the conversations in the same place if some people are only able to or want to choose to engage with parts of those conversations on their own schedules and not have to join every conversation all at once. Now, when you do that, you might find that community members have already created their own channels for discussing certain things. And you don't need to recreate those channels or make, now the leaders have made the channel or anything like that. Avoid duplication and overload of communication channels right now to avoid overwhelming people. Another way to show care right now is to have a conversation reframing your professional development and training. I think we were talking about this a little bit earlier in some of your responses. Ask people what they need right now to continue that key work you're prioritizing. Train towards that. People may need some digital literacy training on new online tools, but also on the risks involved and how to meet those risks, how to lessen those risks. You might need to bring in or provide some training if you have a rich background in this on new life and work balance demands. That might be something you need for yourself as well as your community. It's a great place where it might be a moment to show some vulnerability and all go into that kind of work together. And it's also a moment where folks maybe were individual contributors before, maybe now's a time where collaboration would be appreciated. Or maybe now is a time where mentorship would be appreciated. And folks who maybe didn't want to coach or seemed self-sufficient before could really use just a little bit of support, a little bit of guidance, a little bit of soundboarding right now, a little bit of reflection right now, and really talking about the kind of mentorship that listens, acknowledges, and helps people work towards their goals, not about the kind of mentorship that tells people what to do. We do on our team, both on our MozFest team, but in the larger team we belong to at the foundation called Global Programming, or Global Programs, we have opt-in social time to kind of foster a sense of belonging. This is scheduled with care, with a lot of consideration, so it doesn't overlap with other regular meetings. But it's also completely opt-in, right? So just because it's there doesn't mean you have to go. I often see different people going from week to week. This is used mostly for check-ins. Not a lot of work talk allowed. However, allowed, soft air quotes there. But if folks say, oh, hey, can I Slack you later so we can talk about this other thing? Like, that's a fine level of work conversation to have in those things before we get back to, what are you watching? What are you reading? What are you doing right now? How are you feeling? How are you dealing with those things? We've seen lots of lightweight prompts, and we would love to have social time and icebreaker prompts from all of you if you want to add them to the doc. But sometimes, I've seen things like pet parades and virtual play dates. Depending on the security and privacy needs of your community, it may or may not be appropriate to do something like a Google Street Tour of a favorite hangout that you can't wait to get back to, or perhaps a place where you grew up or something like that, a place with a memory you'd like to share with your team. Lots of different ways to do that. You just want to be mindful of kind of and sensitive to what your team needs, what they can share, what your community has in terms of privacy and security needs, and especially regarding geographical location, as well as online identity. I will say another way to show care that I think about quite often is expecting to make mistakes. So sometimes, like as maybe you're rushing to innovate and you have experiments and an experiment fails, but you have learnings from it, you might call that a mistake. But I'm also talking about the kinds of mistakes that you need to acknowledge and take responsibility for, and ask your community members, how you can move on together from. So I often rehearse, think about my own biases. What are some mistakes I might make? How should I take responsibility for them when I notice them? It gives me some language I can use when I notice I'm doing these things. I try to rehearse the asks, ask the community how to move forward together. Don't just say, well, I'm going to take care of my mistake by doing this thing and it'll be fine. Share the power of fixing, of kind of like holding you accountable to help fix that mistake with your community members. If you have trusted team members, or if your whole team has it suffused with trust, you could ask your teammates like, hey, I anticipate just really messing up at some point with all this stress, going too quickly, or just coming in on a bad day and being short. Like, here are some things that I thought I might say when I notice that I'm doing those things. Do they sound okay to you? Do these sound like okay ways to move forward together? There are some big mistakes with serious consequences. You might want to rehearse for those as well. But there are lots of important mistakes that may seem lower or higher stakes in different contexts. But I think it's important to rehearse right now, acknowledging, give yourself permission, you'll make some of these, and how can I move forward to get from them with the help of my community. The story I tell is used to be one of the people, and I hear people do this. It was my own experience. I used to say guys all the time. Hey guys, okay guys, thanks for meeting guys, without really thinking that through. It was something I wanted to stop. So I just rehearsed a line. I'm sorry, I meant everyone, or I meant, everyone who's here, or folks, just other phrases I could use. And by rehearsing that and making myself use it, I could get kind of a frequency count of whether I was reducing my use of guys or not. But I could also, give myself practice using that new language right away whenever I made that mistake. So it doesn't have to be that mistake. I just encourage you to think about things where you might slip under pressure these days, and how you can prepare for those moments, and taking responsibility for them in caring ways for your community. And then sustainability, and I'm afraid I'm way over, and I apologize for that. And that was a great time to leverage creativity. What is the one thing that we need to do? Should we do it just like we did before, but online? Or is this a moment to really reimagine how we're approaching our mission as well? Open that up. Here's some responses. See what people in your community have to say. You might find a better, more inclusive way forward right now that advances the work under these conditions in a way you might not have thought of before. You can reassess roles, responsibilities, and contribution pathways right now, and really invite people to realign what they're able to offer, and not expect them or work towards how do I help you do the same thing you were doing before? Let them redefine that. Let yourself redefine that for you. Again, prioritization, identifying what matters most to continue while we're online together is a way to show care right now, and a way to really honor what people are bringing to the community. And then we encourage you to continue to scan for emergent funding opportunities. that might help in this moment with things like compensation and other forms of, recognition and really giving people equitable and just thanks for what it is they're contributing. There are a number of links there, and we invite you to add more. I think perhaps we'll do 1 or 2 questions and then move on, and I apologize for running over.
Thanks, Chad. If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the doc or just unmute and ask them out loud.
And if you want to write them in the doc, I can come back and answer them during breakout rooms as well.
You're getting a question on the deconstructive criticism. Oh, sorry, Julian.
Yeah, go ahead, Julian, and we'll come back to the one in the doc.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask if you have some tips on how to best evaluate if it's better to kind of stop what we are doing and people need a break versus trying to organize social events. And the way I'm asking is, I have the feeling it's sometimes the same people who come back to the social events. So maybe it creates more divide than bringing us together. And is it just trying and see what happens, or do you have, other thought on how to evaluate that?
Yeah, I think probably in so much as it's reasonable and manageable to do so, depending on the size of your community, using check-ins at whatever scale. It might be 1-to-1, it might be a little poll during another meeting, it might be something like not necessarily an emailed survey, but like a quick, hey, respond with one of these 3 emojis to let us know what kind of social event would speak most to you on something like Slack. But really, I think that's the hard work of design and really treating community members as the stakeholders they are, and just talking with them across channels. Maybe it's okay to share that concern in a really caring way. Like we've had a few of these social events and I've really enjoyed them and want to make sure everyone knows that they're welcome, but also that we are, very excited about the idea of doing things, differently for folks who need different things. So if you have a particular kind of social experience, or if there's something you really enjoy, maybe also identify a contact person so people know who to go to with those suggestions right now. And it's very streamlined and easy. And it's not just like, I don't want this thing, but I am feeling kind of lost, but nobody's saying who to like share that information with.
Yeah, I'd +1 that, and also acknowledge like different people have different needs. So I think it's expected that some people will keep going to the social event and some people won't. And I think that's okay. Yeah. Cornelius, you raised your hand. Do you want to ask a question, or was it in response to this?
I wrote the same question in the document. I was just thinking, how do you leverage creativity? Because you said this, Chad, how do you do this in these times? So how do you empower people? I don't expect you to have the full answer to this. I'm just thinking out loud, what does it mean to leverage creativity in these times?
Yeah, right. So it's, again, the common theme here probably is asking and listening. So, acknowledging that things are very different, framing the conversation that way, reminding everyone of what the mission is, remind folks of kind of like the planned outcome and how you got there by consensus or whatever decision-making process you got to, 3 months ago, or whenever you last kind of set strategy for this particular time of the year. And then maybe you use something like silent documenting before a discussion to generate some ideas like, is this still the right idea? If there are many ideas here, what seems most important to continue? And from other things you're doing, maybe you're joining some calls like this one, maybe you're reading articles, maybe you've seen things in the way your local government or your local mutual aid societies approach things. Can you think of different ways to do this online right now that might be better than what we originally had planned? And set it up as a chance for everyone to recalibrate together, and to do some peer-to-peer learning from each other about what folks are experiencing online and how it might inform the work going forward.
Looking at the time, I'm going to move us on to breakout rooms. We'll have a 10-minute breakout room. And yeah, just a reminder, please listen to each other in these rooms. This is a great way to practice that active listening, and don't try to plan what you're going to say next while you're listening to someone else. I know I'm guilty of that. Avoid judgment, solutioneering, be kind to one another. And of course, you only share what you're comfortable with sharing. Don't feel like you have to share. And the ask for help button is always there to call myself or Chad into your room. So when you go in your rooms, say hi, introduce yourselves, where you're from, what you're doing. And then the 3 prompts we have for you are how does your organization show care really clearly or strongly? What kinds of care do you think your work or org should offer more of right now and in the future? And what is a new learning you have about community care from this call that you will take away with you? So Chad, are the breakout rooms ready?
They are, and I'll start them now.
Awesome. See you all in 10.
Down there. There we go. Welcome back, everyone. We're down near the bottom of page 7. This is our moment for shared insights. We know we are a little short on time and apologize for that on this call, but please go ahead and share one thing you're taking away from that conversation, and then maybe +1 something that somebody else shares that you find especially powerful. If it's all right with you, we will try to make extra time for the breakout room next week, but I'm also happy to stay on the call for a few minutes after today to answer any particular questions, but no one here needs to stay. I'll just make myself available during that time if it's of use to you, but otherwise, next week, more breakout. That is the plan. Care packages shouldn't be underrated. Yes. In fact, over on the MozFest community Slack, which everyone is invited to join if you haven't already, there's a great happiness packet challenge where it's like email packets that you're sending to someone. A challenge about happy packets of gratitude. That's both in the openness channel, I think, but also on general now, if you want to check that out. Gratitude for companies, offering grace periods, figuring out the right social opportunities to build trust with your community. These are great. If you have anything else you'd like to share from your conversation, please do add it here at the bottom of page 7 under shared insights. If you do see something you'd like to second, or that makes just a lot of sense to you, please +1 it. But again, apologies for the timing today. I do want to hand things over to Abby for the closing circle.
Cool, thanks, Chad. Yeah, and keep writing your insights there. It's been really helpful for us as an org just to learn from all of you. So thanks for that. So starting with reminders, please continue these practices. There was a quote on one of our other calls that when fishermen can't fish, they spend the time fixing their nets. And I don't remember who to attribute that to, but it's below. But yeah, right now a lot of our work has stopped, but you can still fix the holes in your net. So you can still spend time with caring about your community. That sounded nicer in my head earlier, but this work that you do now will really benefit your community long-term. And the practices that you start now and the structure that you input now will really help your community. So please keep doing that. Please fill out the survey. Thank you to the 2 people already clicking on it. That really helps us. We do change things week to week, and we do read everything that's there and listen to you. So please do that. Like Chad mentioned with our rituals of gratitude, there's a shout out and thanks section. So you can use this to thank people from your breakout room, thank a specific community member that might be really helping you care for your community at this time, or someone who's really exemplifying that in your community. That's a great time to put it. And then requests for peer assists. Please put here any request you have. If you're starting a happiness packet challenge that you want to invite people to, write it there. Or if you have an event going on or something you want us to review, please put that there. And then also in the Slack channel, you'll get more eyes on that. We reached over 2,000 people in the MozFest Slack, which is really exciting. And Chad's doing a lot of work, so engaging people there. So both places would be great. We have a bunch of resources for you. Like we said, we didn't invent community care. It's been going on for a long time. So these have, info both on privacy and security online and other resources for grants for sustainability for your community. I do want to highlight this interview by Matt Thompson. He interviewed Akaya Windwood. Matt used to work at Mozilla, and Chad and I did leadership training with Akaya a few years ago, and that's really shaped how we think about our community and how we care about that community. So it's an excellent interview if you want to get more insight into why we do things the way we do. It's a great place. And please add your own resources if you have anything else. I know a few things were shared up above, but if you have any more, please put them there. We have 5 ways to stay involved. There's the invite to Slack. If you are not on our Slack yet, say hi. We have a channel called Movement Building from Home. And then finally, feedback. It's there twice because we really do want to hear from you. And you have 1 more minute that you can spend giving us your feedback. And that really helps us know if we should be running these again or what kind of info you do need, and helps us adjust to what you need. So with that, I think we're going to close up the call. Feel free to stick around after I stop the recording if you have any more questions. But I'm just going to say bye to the recording because that's what I like to do. All right. Bye.
Thank you all so much.